For thousands of years, the sea has been a place of mystery. Long before satellites watched every coastline, before radio waves crossed the oceans, before engines replaced the wind, the open sea belonged to those willing to risk everything. Merchants crossed dangerous waters carrying silk from China, spices from India, silver from the Americas, and treasures that kings could scarcely imagine. But wherever unimaginable wealth traveled, someone was always waiting. Not armies, not kingdoms. Pirates. Most pirates lived short and brutal lives. Many died in battle. Others were captured, hanged, and forgotten. Only a handful ever became legends. And among them, one name stood above almost every other. Not because he ruled the seas for decades. Not because he commanded the largest fleet. Not because he fought the greatest battles. But because, during a single extraordinary voyage, he committed what many historians still consider the greatest pirate robbery in human history. His name was Henry Every. Yet unlike Blackbeard, or Captain Kidd, or Bartholomew Roberts, Henry Every almost vanished from history. His greatest victory lasted only a few hours. His disappearance has remained a mystery for more than 3 centuries. No one knows exactly where he died. No one knows whether he enjoyed his fortune or lost everything. Some believed he became a king. Others believed he died begging in the streets. The truth may be somewhere between myth and history. Tonight, we will slowly follow his remarkable journey, from an ordinary English sailor to the most wanted pirate on earth, from poverty to unimaginable riches, and finally, into one of history's greatest mysteries. So, find a comfortable place to rest. Allow the outside world to become quiet, and together, let us sail back to 17th century England. England in the middle of the 17th century was a nation constantly changing. Kings rose and fell. Civil wars reshaped society. Religious conflict divided communities. Across the oceans, England was slowly transforming into a global maritime power. Its merchants built fortunes through overseas trade. Its navy expanded year after year. Young boys growing up near the coast often dreamed of only one future: the sea. Ships represented opportunity, adventure, escape, and sometimes survival. Life on land could be unforgiving. Poor harvests meant hunger. Jobs were uncertain. Disease appeared without warning. For many young men, the ocean seemed to offer something impossible to find elsewhere: a chance. Henry Every entered this world sometime around the year 1659. The exact details of his birth remain uncertain. Even today, historians continue debating where he first opened his eyes. Most evidence points toward the English county of Devon, a rugged landscape shaped by rolling green hills, fishing village, and countless stories carried inland by sailors returning from distant seas. Children growing up along England's southwestern coast learned early that the ocean was never truly silent. Every tide brought new arrivals: merchant ships from Europe, fishing boats returning with their catch, warships carrying soldiers, privateers boasting about fortunes won in battle. Every harbor echoed with stories from lands that seemed almost impossible to imagine. Young Henry almost certainly heard those stories. Perhaps he listened quietly while experienced sailors described tropical islands. Perhaps he watched enormous ships disappearing beyond the horizon. Perhaps, even before becoming a teenager, he already knew where he wanted to spend his life. By the late 17th century, a sailor's life was anything but easy. Modern ships offer safety equipment, reliable food, fresh water, medical supplies, and accurate navigation. None of these comforts existed then. Wooden ships floated at the mercy of nature. Storms arrived with terrifying speed. Sails ripped apart. Masts collapsed. Disease spread rapidly through crowded decks. Fresh water spoiled. Food rotted. Rats multiplied. A simple infection could become fatal. Many sailors never returned home. Yet despite every danger, thousands continued volunteering, because even terrible wages at sea sometimes exceeded the opportunities waiting on land. Henry Every entered this demanding world while still a young man. Like countless ordinary sailors, he learned by doing. Every rope had a purpose. Every sail required careful handling. Every mistake could cost lives. Life aboard ship followed strict routines. Before sunrise, men climbed towering rigging high above crashing waves. Heavy canvas sails needed constant adjustment. Decks required cleaning every morning. Weapons demanded maintenance. Barrels had to be inspected. Leaks repaired. Anchors raised. Cargo secured. Everything depended upon teamwork. No single sailor, no matter how skilled, could operate a large sailing vessel alone. Trust became essential. So did discipline. Captains ruled their ships with almost absolute authority. Orders were expected to be obeyed immediately. Punishments could be severe. Flogging remained common. Food could be withheld. Men might even be left behind in distant ports. For sailors, respect often depended less upon kindness and more upon competence. A captain capable of surviving storms earned loyalty. One who endangered his crew risked something far more dangerous than mutiny. During these years, England became deeply involved in conflicts across Europe. War created enormous demand for experienced seamen. Merchant ships carried valuable cargo. Naval vessels hunted enemy fleets. Privateers sailed under government licenses, allowing them to attack hostile shipping. The line separating respectable sailor, privateer, and pirate was often surprisingly thin. One government called a man a hero, another called him a criminal. The difference frequently depended upon politics, not morality. Henry Every gradually built experience across these dangerous waters. He learned navigation. He learned discipline. He learned patience. Most importantly, he learned exactly how valuable cargo moved across the world's oceans. That knowledge would eventually change history, because somewhere far beyond England, another empire possessed wealth almost beyond imagination. Its rulers commanded cities larger than London. Its merchants traded across Asia, Africa, and Europe. Its annual revenues exceeded those of nearly every kingdom on earth. This was the Mughal Empire. Its ports overflowed with silk, diamonds, gold, silver, fine cotton, precious stones, and luxury goods desired across the globe. Every year, enormous treasure ships crossed the Indian Ocean. They carried merchants, pilgrims, officials, and fortunes capable of funding entire kingdoms. Very few Europeans ever saw these floating treasure houses. Even fewer imagined attacking them. Doing so would have seemed almost impossible. But history has a remarkable habit of changing because of one unexpected decision. And for Henry Every, that decision was approaching, not on a battlefield, not inside a royal palace, but aboard an ordinary ship, where frustration had quietly been growing for months. No one aboard yet understood that their next choice would trigger one of the largest international manhunts the world had ever seen, and transform an ordinary English sailor into the most famous pirate alive. The ship was called the Charles II. At first glance, there seemed to be nothing extraordinary about her. She was one of several privately owned warships contracted for a dangerous mission. England had entered an agreement with Spain. Together, they planned to attack French interests in the Caribbean. On paper, it appeared to be a respectable military expedition. The owners expected profit. The captains expected glory. The sailors expected wages. Henry Every served as the first mate, a respected position, one that required experience, confidence, and the ability to command men whenever the captain was absent. For many sailors, this assignment promised steady employment, perhaps even fortune. But from the very beginning, something felt wrong. The fleet waited, and waited, and waited. Days became weeks. Weeks slowly became months. The ships remained anchored. The promised mission never seemed to begin. For sailors, waiting was not simply boring. It was devastating. Because while the ships remained idle, no wages were paid. Food grew scarce. Families back home received nothing. Many crew members had borrowed money before sailing. Others depended entirely upon the income they expected from this voyage. Instead, they watched precious months disappear. Frustration spread quietly through every deck. No shouting, no violence, not yet. Simply silence. The dangerous kind of silence that slowly grows inside groups of desperate men. Captains tried maintaining discipline. Owners continued making promises. Officials insisted payment would come soon. But promises do not fill empty stomachs. Among ordinary sailors, one question became increasingly common. How long are we expected to wait? Henry Every observed everything. Unlike younger crewmen, he understood how quickly morale could collapse aboard a ship. He knew hungry sailors became angry sailors, and angry sailors sometimes became mutineers. Mutiny ranked among the most serious crimes imaginable. A sailor who rebelled against his captain risked execution, hanging, sometimes worse. Yet history repeatedly demonstrates something remarkable. When enough people become desperate, fear begins losing its power. During the spring of 1694, that moment finally arrived. Night covered the harbor. Most officers believed their crews remained obedient. But below deck, small conversations quietly connected into larger ones. No speeches. No dramatic declarations. Only whispers. Whispers exchanged between trusted friends. Questions replaced complaints. What if they refused? What if they sailed without permission? What if they took control themselves? Every man understood the danger. Failure meant death. Success could mean freedom or unimaginable wealth. Henry Every did not rush toward rebellion. Everything historians know suggests he acted carefully, thoughtfully, patiently. Mutiny succeeds only when nearly everyone supports it. Half measures are fatal. Every understood this. If even a handful of sailors warned the captain, the entire conspiracy would collapse. So he waited, listening, watching, judging. Gradually, the balance shifted. Enough men had reached the same conclusion. They had waited long enough. On the evening of May 7th, according to most surviving records, the plan moved into action. Darkness concealed every movement. The harbor remained quiet. Many officers slept peacefully, perhaps believing another ordinary morning would soon arrive. They were mistaken. Groups of sailors silently secured key areas aboard the Charles II. Weapons changed hands. Guards were overwhelmed before they understood what was happening. Resistance proved surprisingly limited. Many officers simply found themselves surrounded. Some chose cooperation immediately. Others had little choice. Henry Every emerged as the leader, not through dramatic violence, but through confidence, calmness, and preparation. When dawn approached, The ship no longer belonged to its owners. It belonged to the crew. Remarkably, very little blood had been spilled. Unlike countless mutinies ending in chaos, this one unfolded with astonishing efficiency. Every now faced a decision, one that would define the rest of his life. He could surrender, hope for mercy, perhaps convince authorities the mutiny had been unavoidable, or he could embrace a future from which there would be no return. He chose the sea. The officers unwilling to join received something unexpected: mercy. Instead of execution, many were placed ashore safely. This single decision revealed something important about Henry Every. He was not needlessly cruel, practical, certainly dangerous, without question. But unlike some infamous pirates who ruled through terror alone, Every appeared to understand that unnecessary violence created unnecessary enemies. The crew renamed their vessel. She would no longer be known as the Charles II. From that day forward, she became the Fancy. The name seemed almost playful, yet behind it stood one of the fastest, best armed, and most capable pirate ships sailing anywhere in the world. The transformation began immediately. Extra weight disappeared overboard. Anything slowing the vessel was removed. Cabins were modified, rigging improved, cannons reorganized. The crew worked with astonishing energy. No longer laboring for absent owners, they now worked for themselves. Every improvement increased their own chances of survival, their own future profits. The Fancy became extraordinarily fast. Speed meant everything. A pirate rarely defeated stronger opponents through brute force. Instead, he chose when to fight, when to flee, when to disappear beyond the horizon. A faster ship could escape naval patrols, catch heavily loaded merchant vessels, outmaneuver warships. Speed often meant life itself. Henry Every also introduced another principle unusual for many navies of the era. Loot would be divided according to agreed shares. Captains received larger portions. Officers received slightly more. But ordinary sailors also earned meaningful rewards. Compared with miserable naval wages, pirate articles often appeared surprisingly fair. This unexpected equality attracted experienced seamen from around the world. Pirate risked death every day. But if fortune smiled, even an ordinary sailor could become wealthy beyond imagination. Word spread quickly. Across taverns, ports, hidden anchorages, men began hearing rumors. A capable captain, a magnificent ship, fair distribution of treasure, opportunity. For countless desperate sailors, it sounded almost irresistible. Yet Henry Every understood something else. Small prizes would never justify enormous risks. Capturing fishing boats or lightly loaded merchants would never create lasting fortunes. If he intended to disappear forever, he needed one extraordinary success, one prize, unlike anything previously attempted. Most pirates hunted wherever opportunity appeared. Henry Every started thinking differently. He began studying trade routes, seasonal winds, merchant schedules, political conditions. He searched not merely for wealth, but for the greatest concentration of wealth moving anywhere on Earth. Again and again, one destination appeared: the Indian Ocean. European merchants already understood its importance. Portuguese ships, Dutch fleets, English traders, French companies,
Arab merchants,
Indian vessels, all crossed these waters. But among every ship sailing there, none inspired greater fascination than those belonging to the Mughal Empire. Every year, immense pilgrim fleets journeyed between India and the holy city of Mecca. Their return voyages often carried wealthy merchants, noble families, jewels, gold, silver,
fine textiles,
rare spices, and personal fortunes accumulated across entire lifetimes. These were not ordinary merchant ships. Some rivaled floating cities, protected by dozens of cannons, hundreds of armed guards, and crews numbering in the hundreds. Most European captains avoided provoking them. The consequences seemed unimaginable. Attacking such a vessel would not simply anger merchants. It could threaten diplomatic relations between empires, destroy valuable trading privileges, perhaps even provoke war. Exactly because of that, almost nobody considered trying. Almost nobody, except Henry Every, somewhere beneath the tropical stars. As the Fancy cut silently across endless blue water, an extraordinary plan slowly formed inside the mind of its captain. A plan so ambitious, so reckless, that many experienced sailors would have dismissed it as madness. If successful, every man aboard would become unimaginably rich. If it failed, none of them would likely survive to tell the story. The greatest gamble in pirate history had quietly begun. The Indian Ocean was unlike any body of water Henry Every had ever known. Its rhythms were older than kingdoms, older than empires. For thousands of years, merchants had trusted its seasonal monsoon winds. Unlike the unpredictable storms of the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean possessed its own calendar. Every spring, the winds shifted. Ships departed East Africa, Arabia, Persia, India, and Southeast Asia. Then, months later, the winds reversed. Entire trading fleets returned home. Experienced captains did not fight these winds. They cooperated with them. Their entire lives depended upon understanding nature's invisible schedule. Henry Every quickly recognized something important. Predictable winds meant predictable ships, and predictable ships could be hunted. The Fancy sailed farther east than most European pirates dared venture. Many crews preferred the Caribbean. Others hunted near the African coast. Few possessed both the courage and patience to wait within the immense waters stretching between Arabia and Western India. Yet patience often creates opportunities invisible to hurried men. Weeks passed. The crew repaired sails, cleaned weapons, practiced loading cannons, watched endless horizons. Some men grew restless. Pirates rarely enjoyed waiting. Waiting produced no treasure, only uncertainty. But Every remained calm. He had not crossed half the world searching for ordinary merchant vessels. He hunted something extraordinary, something worth risking everything. Each evening, the crew gathered beneath brilliant tropical skies. Unlike Europe, the stars here appeared astonishingly bright. Far from smoke, far from crowded cities, the heavens stretched endlessly overhead. Ancient sailors believed the stars carried messages. Others trusted them simply as guides. Henry Every relied upon them every night. Long before modern navigation, the sky functioned as the world's greatest map. Every constellation, every familiar star, helped determine direction, latitude, time, even approaching weather. The sea demanded constant attention. Small mistakes accumulated into disaster. A damaged rudder, an unnoticed leak, spoiled drinking water, disease. Each threatened the expedition as seriously as enemy ships. Contrary to romantic legends, most pirate voyages involved very little fighting. Instead, they consisted of endless maintenance, repairing rope, replacing damaged spars, cleaning cannon barrels, preserving food, watching horizons, preparing, waiting. Because when opportunity finally appeared, preparation determined survival. One afternoon, lookouts spotted distant sails. Excitement swept across the deck. Men rushed toward the rails. Cannons were checked. Weapons distributed. But as the ship drew closer, disappointment followed. A small coastal trader, poorly loaded, barely worth the ammunition required to capture her. Henry Every let her pass. Several younger sailors protested quietly. Surely, some treasure proved better than none. But Every shook his head. Every unnecessary attack carried consequences. Survivors spread warnings. Governments increased patrols. Merchants altered routes. The greatest hunters understand something many never learn. Knowing what not to chase often matters more than knowing what to pursue. So they waited. Days blended together beneath the relentless tropical sun. Salt coated every surface. Wood expanded beneath humid air. Canvas cracked softly in the wind. Flying fish occasionally burst from the sea. Dolphins raced alongside the hull. At night, bioluminescent plankton transformed each breaking wave into liquid stars. Even hardened pirates sometimes paused, simply to admire the beauty surrounding them. The ocean possessed two faces. One offered unimaginable violence. The other, perfect peace. Eventually, news reached them, not through newspapers, not through official reports, but through the oldest communication network ever created. Sailors. Ships constantly exchanged information, sometimes willingly, sometimes under threat. Every harbor contained rumors. Every merchant knew stories. Every fisherman noticed unusual movements. Gradually, the same rumor appeared again and again. The annual Mughal convoy had departed, returning from Arabia, loaded with pilgrims, merchants, officials, and treasure. Among these vessels, one towered above the others. Her name, ganj-i-sawai, translated roughly, it meant exceeding treasure. Even her name sounded like legend. She belonged not to ordinary merchants, but to the Mughal emperor himself. She carried hundreds of passengers, dozens of powerful cannons, elite guards, gold, silver, jewels, silks, private fortunes, religious donations, luxury goods from across Asia, perhaps the richest single ship then sailing anywhere on Earth. To attack such a vessel bordered on insanity. Her size alone intimidated experienced captains. She outweighed almost every pirate ship afloat. Her defenders outnumbered every crew several times over. If battle came, the Fancy might simply disappear beneath overwhelming firepower. Yet Henry Every noticed something others overlooked. Large ships possessed tremendous strength. They also possessed tremendous weaknesses. Their size made them slower. Turning required time. Their crews often relied upon discipline rather than flexibility. Meanwhile, the Fancy had become astonishingly fast. Her crew operated with remarkable efficiency. Every sailor understood exactly what to do. Pirates survived because hesitation killed. The plan formed carefully. Strike quickly. Remain mobile. Avoid prolonged exchanges. Exploit confusion. Victory would depend not upon strength, but upon timing. The crew listened quietly as Every explained their objective. No dramatic speeches. No promises. Simply facts. The prize before them could change every life aboard, but failure would almost certainly end those lives. No one withdrew. No one asked to leave. Each sailor understood the choice. History often remembers famous leaders. Less often does it remember ordinary men who willingly followed impossible dreams. Without them, no great expedition succeeds. Without them, no empire expands. Without them, No pirate captain becomes legendary. One by one, the men prepared themselves. Pistols were cleaned, powder kept dry, cutlasses sharpened, axes inspected, boarding hooks coiled carefully beside the rails. The smell of tar mixed with gunpowder. Silence gradually replaced conversation. Even experienced pirates felt nervous. Courage does not mean feeling no fear. It means continuing despite it. Several days later, lookouts shouted, "Sails!" Far beyond the horizon, small white shapes emerged against the brilliant blue sky. The convoy. Every climbed quietly toward the quarterdeck. He raised a brass telescope. Holding it steady against the gentle motion of the sea, he studied the distant vessels, merchant escorts, support ships. Then, one enormous silhouette, larger than the others, much larger. Even at great distance, the size commanded attention. The ganj-i-sawai. It appeared almost like a floating fortress. Sunlight reflected from countless windows. Multiple decks towered above the water. Massive lateen sails stretched high into the sky. Hundreds of people moved across her decks. To the pirates, it must have seemed almost unbelievable. Years of preparation, months of waiting, thousands of miles crossed. Everything had led to this single moment. Every lowered the telescope. For several long seconds, he said nothing. The sea itself seemed to grow strangely quiet. Finally, he spoke only a few calm words. "There she is." No cheering followed.
No celebration.
Only determination, because every sailor understood. The hardest part had not yet begun. They raised more sail. The Fancy leaned forward eagerly beneath strengthening wind. Water exploded against her bow. The distance slowly began to close. Aboard the Mughal convoy, most passengers probably noticed nothing unusual. Merchant traffic remained common. European vessels frequently crossed these waters. Few suspected danger. Why would they? Their flagship carried heavy guns. Professional soldiers. Imperial authority. Who would dare challenge them? Hidden beneath the same peaceful sky, history quietly accelerated toward one of the most extraordinary encounters the Age of Sail would ever witness. Neither side could yet imagine that within only a few hours, the balance of global trade, diplomatic relations, and pirate history itself would change forever. The enormous Mughal flagship drifted across the calm waters with quiet confidence. From a distance, she seemed almost untouchable. Her towering stern rose high above the sea. Multiple decks stretched from bow to stern. Richly carved wooden balconies overlooked the water. Brilliant white sails caught the afternoon wind. Golden banners fluttered proudly from towering masts. To anyone watching from afar, she represented the wealth of an empire. Few ships in the 17th century inspired such respect. She was not simply transporting cargo. She carried pilgrims returning from the holy city of Mecca, merchants who had spent years building fortunes, members of wealthy families, government officials, religious leaders, servants, sailors, soldiers, children. Hundreds of lives moved together aboard this floating city. Within heavy wooden chests rested silver coins from distant kingdoms, silk woven by master craftsmen, fine cotton cloth that European merchants eagerly sought, rare spices whose value exceeded their weight in gold, jewelry decorated with diamonds from India's famous mines, emeralds, rubies, pearls gathered from warm tropical waters, ivory, perfumes, and personal fortunes accumulated across generations. No single passenger possessed all this wealth, but together, the value became almost impossible to imagine. Henry Every understood something equally important. Most of those aboard had never expected to fight pirates. Certainly not pirates bold enough to challenge an imperial flagship. Confidence can become a dangerous weakness. The Fancy continued closing the distance. Not recklessly, not at full speed. Every wanted patience. He knew excitement often destroyed carefully prepared plans. Instead, he watched, measured, calculated. Every shift in the wind, every movement of the convoy, every cannon visible through the gun ports. Beside him, his officers quietly repeated orders throughout the ship. No shouting, no panic. Experienced sailors moved with remarkable efficiency. Powder boys carried fresh charges below deck. Gunners checked their elevation one final time. Boarding axes rested beside the rail. Muskets remained dry beneath protective cloth. Each pirate understood his responsibility. Months of preparation had produced extraordinary discipline. As evening slowly approached, the wind strengthened. Exactly as every had hoped, the Fancy surged forward. Her lighter hull responded instantly. She sliced across the sea with surprising speed. Lookouts aboard the Mughal convoy finally noticed the approaching vessel. At first, there seemed little reason for concern. European merchant ships regularly appeared throughout these waters. Some belonged to the English East India Company. Others sailed under Dutch, Portuguese, or French flags. The approaching ship appeared ordinary enough, until she continued closing. Fast. Far too fast. Warning bells echoed across the ganj-i-sawai. Officers hurried onto the upper deck. Orders rang through the warm evening air. Cannons prepared. Soldiers assembled. Passengers looked nervously toward the growing silhouette. The pirate flag had not yet appeared. Every preferred uncertainty. Confusion often became his greatest weapon. Only when escape became impossible did the black banner finally rise above the Fancy. A murmur spread across the Mughal flagship. Some passengers had never seen such a flag before. Others immediately understood. Pirates. Real pirates. The word itself carried terrifying power. Across every ocean, stories spread quickly. Merchant crews whispered about pirate attacks. Ports exchanged frightening rumors. Children grew up hearing tales of ruthless sea robbers. Now, those stories had become reality. The Imperial Guards rushed toward their assigned positions. Cannons rolled into place. Archers climbed elevated platforms. Musketeers loaded their weapons. Despite the sudden alarm, the ganj-i-sawai remained a formidable opponent. She carried dozens of heavy guns. Far more than the Fancy. If those cannons fired accurately, the pirate attack might end before boarding even became possible. Henry Every understood the danger perfectly. Everything depended upon the opening moments. The distance narrowed. 200 yards. 150. 100. The sea between them seemed to disappear. Every raised one hand. The crew waited. No one fired. The silence became almost unbearable. Then, he lowered his arm. A thunderous explosion shattered the evening. The Fancy's forward guns erupted together. Smoke engulfed the bow. Flames burst from every cannon. Iron shot screamed across the water. One massive projectile smashed directly into the Mughal ship's rigging. Heavy timber splintered violently. Ropes snapped. Sailcloth tore apart. Fragments rained across the crowded deck. Cries filled the air. The battle had begun. The ganj-i-sawai answered immediately. Her heavy cannons roared. Enormous clouds of smoke rolled outward. The sea erupted around the Fancy as iron balls slammed into the water. One shot passed terrifyingly close above the pirates' heads. Another struck the ocean only yards away. Towering columns of water crashed across the deck. But then, disaster struck the Mughal flagship. One of her own enormous cannons exploded. Historians still debate exactly why. Perhaps poor maintenance, perhaps damaged powder, perhaps simple bad luck. Whatever the reason, the result proved catastrophic. The cannon burst apart. Iron fragments flew across the gun deck. Nearby powder ignited. Men were thrown violently to the floor. Several died instantly. Others suffered terrible burns. Smoke filled the enclosed space. For several crucial minutes, confusion replaced discipline. Henry Every recognized the opportunity immediately. Closer. The Fancy surged forward. Again her guns fired. This time, their target was not the hull, but the rigging, the masts, the steering equipment. Every wanted the giant ship alive. A sinking treasure ship held little value. Piece by piece, the Mughal vessel lost her ability to maneuver. Damaged sails flapped uselessly. Broken ropes tangled overhead. Orders became difficult to hear beneath constant cannon fire. Passengers rushed desperately below deck. Children cried. Merchants attempted protecting whatever valuables they could carry. Some prayed, others hid. A few armed themselves with whatever weapons they could find. The pirate crew prepared for the most dangerous stage of every naval battle. Boarding. Cannons decided only part of the fight. Victory ultimately depended upon controlling the enemy ship itself. Heavy grappling hooks spun through the air. Iron claws crashed against wooden railings. Ropes tightened. The two ships slammed together. Timber groaned beneath tremendous force. For one brief moment, everything became strangely quiet. Both crews stared across only a few feet of open space. Then, Henry Every drew his pistol and stepped forward. The pirates followed. Like a breaking wave, they poured onto the deck of the richest ship in the world. The deck erupted into chaos. Not the orderly chaos of trained soldiers, but the desperate confusion of hundreds of frightened people suddenly realizing that their floating fortress had been breached. Smoke drifted across shattered railings. Splintered timber littered the deck. Broken ropes swung wildly overhead. Somewhere high above, a torn sail snapped violently in the strengthening wind. The pirates crossed the gap in waves. Each man knew hesitation could prove fatal. The first moments after boarding often determined the outcome of an entire battle. Move quickly. Keep moving. Never allow defenders time to reorganize. Henry Every landed on the enemy deck among the very first. His boots struck polished teak still wet from seawater. For only a heartbeat, he paused. Not from fear, but to understand the battlefield. Good captains never allowed excitement to replace judgment. His eyes swept across every direction. Forward. A cluster of Imperial guards hurried toward the bow. To his right, musketeers attempted forming a firing line. Above, archers searched desperately for clear targets through drifting cannon smoke. Behind him, more pirates continued climbing aboard. The battle had become unavoidable. A Mughal officer shouted commands in Persian. Drums echoed somewhere below deck. Several soldiers advanced with curved swords glittering beneath the fading sunlight. Henry raised his pistol. One carefully aimed shot. The report echoed across the deck. The officer fell. The advancing line hesitated. Sometimes, victory belonged not to the strongest army, but to the side creating the greatest uncertainty. The pirates surged forward. Steel struck steel. Axes collided against shields. Pistols fired at frighteningly close range. Smoke mixed with screams, shouting, and the endless sound of crashing waves against the hull. Unlike organized European armies, pirates rarely fought in perfect formations. Each sailor relied upon instinct developed through years of surviving dangerous seas. Many preferred pistols. Others trusted heavy boarding axes. Some carried 2 or 3 loaded firearms before finally drawing their cutlasses. Every weapon served one purpose: survive. Despite their courage, the Imperial Guards struggled to organize an effective defense. The cannon explosion below deck had already shattered communication. Senior officers searched desperately for one another. Orders arrived too late, or not at all. Entire sections of the ship fought separate battles without knowing what happened elsewhere. Henry Every recognized confusion spreading through the defenders. He pressed harder. Groups of pirates secured stairways leading below deck. Others captured the steering position. Several climbed toward the quarterdeck. One by one, critical positions fell under pirate control. Yet the fighting remained far from over. The ganj-i-sawai carried hundreds of armed men. Many refused surrender. Some defended wealthy passengers. Others simply fought because retreat no longer remained possible. The struggle continued through narrow passageways, across crowded decks, inside cramped cabins. Visibility grew worse every minute. Black powder smoke collected beneath wooden ceilings. Lanterns swung violently overhead. The smell of burning powder mixed with seawater, fresh blood, tar, and splintered oak. For those inside, time seemed to disappear. Minutes stretched into something much longer. Outside, the sun slowly approached the horizon. Golden evening light filtered through drifting smoke. It illuminated scenes few survivors would ever forget. Merchants clutching family treasures. Children crying beside frightened mothers. Soldiers refusing to abandon their posts. Pirates searching every corner of the enormous vessel. History often reduces famous battles to numbers. Ships captured. Lives lost. Treasure stolen. Reality always proves far more complicated. Every person aboard possessed a different story. A merchant returning home after years abroad. A sailor hoping finally to see his family. A young apprentice experiencing his first voyage. A father carrying gifts for children waiting in India. None could have imagined becoming part of one of history's most famous pirate attacks. Henry Every never lost sight of his true objective: treasure, not destruction. He repeatedly ordered his men to secure important areas first: the magazine, the helm, the cargo holds, the officers' quarters. Once those locations remained under pirate control, resistance gradually weakened. As darkness settled across the Indian Ocean, the battle slowly came to an end. Groups of exhausted defenders finally surrendered. Weapons clattered across wooden decks. The terrible noise of combat faded. Only smaller sounds remained: crackling fire, groaning timber, wounded men calling quietly for help. The endless breathing of the sea. The richest ship in the East now belonged to Henry Every. For several long moments, no pirates spoke. Many simply stared around them, almost unable to believe what they had accomplished. Against overwhelming odds, they had captured an imperial treasure ship, one that countless sailors considered impossible to defeat. Yet their greatest surprise still waited below deck. Lanterns illuminated dark passageways as Every descended into the interior. Heavy doors stood locked. Iron chests lined reinforced compartments. Warehouse after warehouse seemed filled with valuable cargo. Silks carefully wrapped against moisture. Boxes containing spices whose fragrance filled entire rooms. Fine porcelain. Bundles of rare textiles. Silver bars stacked in astonishing quantities. Then, the jewels. Diamonds reflected lantern light like tiny stars. Loose pearls spilled across velvet cloth. Rubies glowed deep red. Emeralds flashed brilliant green. Gold coins filled leather bags so heavy that 2 men struggled to lift them. Some pirates simply stood frozen. Throughout their lives, They had imagined unimaginable wealth. Now, they stood inside it. One sailor quietly removed a handful of silver coins. He turned them slowly through his fingers, perhaps wondering whether he still dreamed. Another laughed uncontrollably. Others fell completely silent. Henry Every remained remarkably calm. He knew excitement often destroyed discipline. Treasure this enormous created new dangers. Greed. Arguments. Violence among one's own crew. Maintaining order now became just as important as winning the battle itself. He ordered careful inventories. Nothing removed without permission. Nothing hidden. Everything would eventually be divided according to the pirate articles agreed upon before the voyage. Not every man liked waiting, but nearly all respected every enough to obey. That discipline would preserve the crew from tearing itself apart. Exactly how much treasure lay aboard has remained one of history's greatest mysteries. Contemporary reports differed enormously. Some estimated several £100,000. Others suggested values exceeding £600,000. When converted into modern purchasing power, the figures become astonishing. Historians have proposed estimates reaching hundreds of millions of dollars, perhaps even more. Absolute certainty remains impossible. No complete inventory survived. No official accounting ever existed. Much disappeared forever into private hands. What historians agree upon is something simpler. No pirate crew before Henry Every had ever captured a prize remotely comparable. The greatest heist in pirate history had become reality. Yet, far beyond the celebration aboard the Fancy, news had already begun traveling across the Indian Ocean. And once it reached India, it would unleash consequences that Henry Every, or anyone aboard his ship, could never have imagined. The celebration aboard the Fancy lasted only a short time. Experienced pirates understood an uncomfortable truth. Winning the battle was only half the challenge. Keeping the treasure would prove far more difficult. Night settled gently across the Indian Ocean. The stars emerged one by one above the silent sea. Only hours earlier, the waters had echoed with cannon fire. Now, the same ocean seemed strangely peaceful. Lanterns glowed softly aboard both ships. Small repair crews worked through the darkness. Broken rigging required immediate attention. Damaged sails needed patching. The Fancy had survived the battle remarkably well. The ganj-i-sawai, though badly damaged, still floated. Henry Every climbed once again onto the upper deck. The warm tropical wind carried the scent of salt, smoke, and distant rain. He looked toward the enormous treasure ship. Even in darkness, the silhouette remained impressive. For generations, it had represented imperial power. Tonight, it represented something entirely different: opportunity and danger. Every knew this attack would never remain secret. Some pirate victories disappeared without record. This one never could. Too many survivors, too many witnesses, too much wealth. Somewhere aboard the Mughal flagship, merchants were already calculating their losses. Officers were preparing reports. Religious pilgrims whispered prayers of disbelief. Within days, every important port around the Indian Ocean would hear the same astonishing story. A European pirate had captured the emperor's treasure ship. The consequences would reach far beyond the sea. They would eventually influence diplomacy, international trade, and politics stretching from India to London. But first, there remained one final task: dividing the treasure. Among pirates, this moment often proved more dangerous than battle itself. History contains countless stories of successful crews destroying themselves through greed. Arguments became fistfights. Fistfights became murders. Murders split entire crews apart. Henry every intended to prevent exactly that. Before the voyage had begun, every sailor had agreed to written articles. These articles functioned almost like a constitution. They explained discipline, compensation, punishment, and perhaps most importantly, how treasure would be shared. Unlike many European navies, pirate crews often voted upon important decisions. Captains commanded during battle, but outside combat, their authority depended heavily upon respect. Every understood this system well. It encouraged loyalty. If every sailor believed he would receive a fair reward, every sailor possessed reason to protect both captain and crew. The counting began. Leather bags filled with silver coins, heavy bars of gold, jewelry, fine fabrics, private valuables, every item carefully examined, every share recorded. No complete list survives today. Historians have spent centuries attempting to estimate exactly how much wealth changed hands. The figures vary enormously. Some contemporary accounts exaggerated, others likely underestimated. Yet, regardless of which calculation proves closest to reality, the conclusion remains remarkably consistent. Each pirate became extraordinarily wealthy. Many ordinary sailors suddenly possessed fortunes impossible to earn through honest work. Some received enough money to purchase estates, others enough to retire comfortably. One successful voyage had transformed their entire futures.
Imagine.
Spending years surviving on poor wages, sleeping inside cramped wooden ships, enduring storms, disease, and hunger. Then, within a single afternoon, receiving more wealth than most people earned across several lifetimes. It almost seems unbelievable. Yet for the crew of the Fancy, it became reality. Some men celebrated loudly. Others quietly examined gold coins beneath lantern light. Several simply sat alone, perhaps struggling to understand that poverty no longer controlled their lives. Henry every accepted his own larger share. As captain, the pirate articles granted him greater compensation. Yet compared with kings or emperors, even his immense fortune carried a hidden weakness. Money possesses value only while it can safely be spent. Every understood something many younger pirates overlooked. Treasure attracts attention. The richer a pirate becomes, the harder disappearing becomes. Gold can purchase freedom, but it can also betray its owner. Far away, across the Arabian Sea, the first survivors reached shore. Their stories spread with astonishing speed. At first, many listeners refused to believe them. An imperial treasure ship, captured by pirates?
Impossible.
Surely exaggerated. Surely mistaken. Yet additional witnesses soon confirmed the disaster. Merchant captains repeated identical accounts. Pilgrims described the same terrifying battle. Government officials prepared urgent reports. Within days, the news reached Surat, one of the greatest ports in the Mughal Empire. Its crowded docks connected India with Arabia, Persia, East Africa, and Europe. Ships from dozens of nations anchored there. English merchants, Dutch traders, Armenian businessmen,
Arab captains,
Gujarati merchants. News traveled through Surat like fire racing across dry grass. Markets buzzed with frightened conversation. Shopkeepers abandoned ordinary business. Crowds gathered around anyone claiming fresh information. Could the emperor truly have lost such enormous wealth? Were European pirates now attacking pilgrim ships? Was nowhere safe anymore? The governor of Surat immediately recognized the crisis. This was no ordinary robbery. The Mughal Empire depended heavily upon maritime trade. If merchants feared the sea, commerce itself might suffer. Worse still, Many local officials blamed the English, not merely the pirates, the English. After all, Henry Every had been born in England. His crew included many English sailors. The distinction between pirate, merchant, and government official appeared far less obvious from India's perspective. Soon, angry crowds gathered outside English trading factories. Merchants feared riots. Some hid inside fortified buildings. Others prepared ships for immediate departure. The English East India Company suddenly faced a nightmare. For decades, the company had worked patiently to earn trading privileges from the Mughal Empire. Factories, warehouses, commercial rights, everything depended upon imperial goodwill. Now, one pirate captain threatened to destroy years of diplomacy. Company officials wrote desperate letters. They insisted Henry Every acted independently. He represented no government, no company, no king. But convincing furious imperial authorities would not be easy. Thousands of miles away, in London, no one yet understood the approaching storm. The English government remained unaware. The East India Company continued ordinary business. Merchants discussed prices. Politicians debated domestic affairs. Life proceeded normally. Then, the first reports arrived. Letters crossed oceans slowly. Months often passed before news reached Europe. When officials finally learned what Henry Every had done, the reaction bordered on panic. This was not simply piracy. It was an international crisis. England could not afford war with the Mughal Empire. Indian trade generated enormous profits. Spices, silks, cotton.
There.
Every voyage enriched investors. If imperial ports closed to English merchants, financial consequences would be devastating. The government reached a remarkable conclusion. Henry Every could no longer be treated as an ordinary criminal. He had become the most wanted man in the world. The order spread across England with remarkable speed. Every port received the same message. Every naval commander, every colonial governor, every customs officer, every merchant captain. If Henry Every appeared, he was to be captured immediately, dead or alive. It was one of the largest international manhunts the world had ever witnessed. The English crown issued an enormous reward. The East India Company added even more money. Local governments promised additional payments. Suddenly, one pirate captain became worth more than many legitimate fortunes. Across Europe, his description appeared on printed notices. His name spread through taverns, coffee houses, markets, docks, churchyards. People who had never seen the ocean now discussed Henry Every. Some admired him, others feared him. Many simply wondered how one ordinary sailor had embarrassed two of the world's greatest powers. Meanwhile, the fancy continued westward. Every understood time was no longer his ally. Every passing day increased the number of ships searching for him. Every harbor became more dangerous. Every friendly face could become a betrayer. For perhaps the first time since the mutiny, the weight of command settled heavily upon his shoulders. He had succeeded, beyond imagination. Now, he had to survive. The pirate crew gathered beneath the quarterdeck one quiet evening. The ocean stretched peacefully toward every horizon. The excitement of victory had begun fading. Reality slowly returned. Several sailors assumed they would remain together. After all, their greatest success still lay fresh in memory. Others disagreed. The larger the crew, the easier it became to locate them. One ship carrying dozens of suddenly wealthy pirates attracted attention. Many smaller groups could disappear. Henry Every listened carefully. Then, he made what would become one of the most important decisions of his life. The crew would separate. Each man would choose his own future. Some would sail toward the Caribbean, others toward the American colonies. Several hoped to reach Ireland, Scotland, the Netherlands, or hidden coastal villages where few questions would be asked. The Fancy herself had become too famous. Anyone recognizing the ship could report her immediately. Everyone understood that famous pirate ships rarely enjoyed long careers. Eventually, they were captured, destroyed, or betrayed. He intended something different: disappear completely, not through another battle, but through anonymity. The treasure itself created another problem. Gold is heavy, silver even heavier. Jewels solved this difficulty. Diamonds, rubies, emeralds, pearls. A handful could represent enormous wealth. Easy to hide, easy to transport, easy to sell. At least, in theory. In reality, selling famous stolen jewels proved surprisingly difficult. Merchants asked questions. Jewelry dealers recognized unusual stones. Governments investigated suspicious fortunes. The very wealth that promised freedom threatened exposure. As the weeks passed, the pirates slowly dispersed. Some vanished into bustling ports. Others purchased new identities. A few likely returned to ordinary lives under different names. History remembers almost none of them. The world's attention focused upon one man alone, Henry Every. Rumors multiplied with astonishing speed. One claimed he had sailed to Madagascar, where he crowned himself king. Another insisted he married an Indian princess. Some swore he commanded a hidden pirate kingdom filled with unimaginable treasure. Others believed he had escaped into the Ottoman Empire. A few even claimed he reached the Americas and lived quietly as a wealthy plantation owner. The truth became increasingly difficult to separate from imagination. This often happens when famous people disappear. Human beings dislike unanswered questions. When facts remain scarce, stories rush in to fill the empty spaces. The search expanded across 3 continents. Royal Navy vessels inspected suspicious ships. Colonial governors questioned newly arrived sailors. Port officials compared faces against printed descriptions. Informants appeared everywhere, sometimes motivated by loyalty, more often by money. The reward for Henry Every's capture tempted many. One successful betrayal could transform an ordinary person's life. Yet, weeks became months. Months became years. Still, no Henry Every. Authorities captured several members of his crew. Some proved less fortunate than their captain. Trials followed. Courtrooms filled with spectators eager to glimpse men who had participated in history's greatest pirate robbery. The evidence proved overwhelming. Witnesses testified. Merchants identified prisoners. Surviving passengers described the attack. Several pirates received death sentences. Public executions remained common during this era. Governments believed visible punishment discouraged future crime. Crowds gathered eagerly. Children climbed rooftops. Street vendors sold food. For many, executions resembled public entertainment. The condemned pirates walked calmly toward the gallows. Most understood escape no longer remained possible. Their captain still remained missing. Henry Every's absence fascinated everyone. How could the world's most wanted criminal simply vanish? The question puzzled investigators. He possessed no kingdom, no army, no fortress, only money. Could money truly purchase invisibility? Perhaps. Or perhaps, luck continued favoring him. Some reports suggested Every eventually reached Ireland. Others pointed toward Western England. One particularly persistent story claimed he returned home under another name, living quietly among people who never realized whom they greeted each morning. It is an appealing thought. The legendary pirate, buying bread, walking village roads, watching fishing boats from familiar cliffs. Invisible, ordinary, safe. But history offers little proof. Another account paints a much darker ending. According to this version, Henry Every trusted dishonest merchants to convert his stolen jewels into usable money. Instead, they cheated him. Piece by piece, his magnificent fortune disappeared. The richest pirate alive, reduced once again to poverty. One 18th century writer even claimed Every died alone, without enough money for a proper burial. Whether this tragic ending reflects reality, no one knows. Modern historians remain cautious. The surviving evidence simply does not allow certainty. And perhaps that uncertainty explains why Henry Every continues capturing imaginations more than 3 centuries later. Blackbeard died in battle. Captain Kidd stood trial. Bartholomew Roberts fell beneath Royal Navy gunfire. Their stories possess endings. Henry Every possesses only possibilities. The sea kept its final secret. Somewhere, sometime, he disappeared from history, without a farewell, without a confession, without revealing where the greatest pirate fortune finally came to rest. Perhaps that was exactly what he always intended. For a man who had outwitted empires, escaping history itself may have been his greatest achievement. The mystery surrounding Henry Every refused to disappear. Years passed, then decades. Yet his name continued appearing in conversations wherever sailors gathered. In the crowded taverns of London, old captains lowered their voices whenever someone mentioned the fancy. Young apprentices listened with wide eyes. Some dreamed of following the same path. Others quietly thanked fortune that they never had. Stories have remarkable power, especially stories without endings. Every unanswered question allows the imagination to grow. Perhaps that explains why Henry Every became something far larger than a pirate. He became an idea, an ordinary man who had challenged empires, won, and simply vanished. The English government desperately wanted another ending. Authorities preferred criminals to be captured, placed on trial, publicly punished. Justice, after all, sends a message. Mystery does not. But no matter how many rewards they offered, no matter how many ports they searched, Henry Every remained beyond their reach. Eventually, governments moved on. New wars demanded attention. Different pirates appeared. Fresh crises occupied politicians. Time always moves forward. Yet Every's extraordinary attack produced consequences that continued long after the treasure disappeared. The Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb reacted with understandable fury. He ruled one of the wealthiest empires on earth. His authority stretched across much of the Indian subcontinent. Millions of subjects recognized his power. For one of his imperial treasure ships to be captured by foreign pirates was more than theft. It was humiliation. Aurangzeb demanded answers. How had this happened? Why had European merchants failed to prevent it? Could English traders truly be trusted? The English East India Company suddenly found itself facing disaster. Its directors understood the danger immediately. Their ships depended upon Mughal permission to trade. Factories in Surat, Bombay, Madras, and other ports existed only because imperial officials allowed them to operate. Without those permissions, years of investment would disappear almost overnight. Company representatives hurried before Mughal officials. Letters were written, promises made, compensation discussed. Again and again, they insisted upon the same argument. Henry Every was not England. He was not the East India Company. He was not acting for the crown. He was simply pirate. Aurangzeb remained unconvinced. From his perspective, the distinction mattered little. Every had been English. His crew contained Englishmen. His weapons came from Europe. Why should responsibility end there? For a time, several English merchants found themselves imprisoned. Factories closed temporarily. Trade slowed. Fear spread throughout the company. Investors in London anxiously awaited news from India. Would the Mughal Empire ban English commerce entirely? If that happened, the financial losses would be staggering. Eventually, diplomacy prevailed. The English government promised stronger action against piracy. The East India Company offered cooperation. Gradually, relations stabilized. Trade resumed. But nothing remained exactly as before. One pirate captain had demonstrated something remarkable. A single ship, properly commanded, could influence international politics. Few individuals in history have altered relations between major powers through a single afternoon's actions. Henry Every managed exactly that. Ironically, he likely never intended such consequences. His goal had been simple: wealth, freedom, escape. Instead, he accidentally reshaped imperial policy. The attack encouraged stronger naval patrols. Merchant convoys became better protected. Governments exchanged intelligence more frequently. Anti-piracy cooperation expanded. In many ways, the golden age of piracy grew partly because of men like Henry Every. And eventually, it also ended because governments learned from them. Future pirate hunters studied Every carefully. They examined how he selected targets, how he organized his crew, how he maintained discipline. Most importantly, how successfully he disappeared. His escape frightened authorities almost as much as his victory. Capturing pirates discouraged crime. Failing to capture them inspired imitators. Across Europe, adventure stories began appearing. Cheap printed pamphlets exaggerated Every's exploits. Some transformed him into a noble hero, others into a ruthless monster. Truth became increasingly difficult to separate from entertainment. One publication claimed he founded a magnificent pirate kingdom on Madagascar. According to this tale, he ruled thousands of followers, married an exotic princess, lived inside palaces filled with treasure. Modern historians have found no convincing evidence supporting this story, but readers loved it. Reality often competes poorly against imagination. Another legend suggested Every buried his treasure on some forgotten island. Maps supposedly marked the location. Secret clues supposedly survived. Generation after generation searched. No treasure appeared. Yet even today, treasure hunters continue hoping. The dream refuses to die, perhaps because buried treasure represents something deeper than wealth. It represents possibility, the belief that extraordinary discoveries still wait beyond the next horizon. Henry Every's real achievement required no exaggeration. The historical record alone remains astonishing. He commanded one successful mutiny, captured history's richest pirate prize, triggered a global manhunt, influenced relations between England and the Mughal Empire, then disappeared. Few lives compress so much drama into so few years. Yet despite every tale of gold, violence, and adventure, Henry Every's story also reveals something quieter, something more human. He began life exactly as countless other boys did. No noble title,
No inherited fortune.
no army, no kingdom, only opportunity and choices. History often celebrates kings because they inherit power. Pirates remind us that some individuals create entirely different destinies, sometimes admirable, sometimes terrible, always fascinating. Every decision Henry ever made carried consequences. Joining the sea, supporting mutiny, crossing into piracy, waiting patiently in the Indian Ocean, attacking the ganj-i-sawai, disappearing afterward. Remove any one decision, and history changes. The greatest pirate robbery never happens. The Mughal Empire never demands justice. The world's largest manhunt never begins. Sometimes, history turns not upon vast armies, but upon one person deciding to do something no one else believed possible. As the years quietly passed, the oceans continued their endless rhythm. The tides rose. The tides fell. Storms crossed the Atlantic. Monsoon winds returned faithfully across the Indian Ocean. Merchant fleets resumed their journeys. New captains replaced old ones. Empires continued expanding. The world moved forward. Yet somewhere within those endless changes, the memory of Henry ever refused to disappear. Not because he had ruled an empire, not because he had conquered nations, but because he had accomplished something that seemed almost impossible. Historians today often ask an interesting question. Was Henry ever truly the greatest pirate who ever lived? The answer depends entirely upon what we mean by greatness. If greatness means ruling the seas for many years, others surpassed him. If greatness means capturing hundreds of ships, others achieved more. If greatness means becoming the most feared pirate alive, Blackbeard's terrifying reputation still echoes through history. But if greatness means changing history through a single extraordinary act, very few names compare. The attack on the ganj-i-sawai permanently changed how governments viewed piracy. Before Henry ever, pirates were dangerous criminals. After Henry ever, pirates became international political threats. That distinction mattered enormously. Governments began cooperating. Merchant companies invested more heavily in protection. Naval patrols expanded. Information flowed more quickly between distant colonies. One successful pirate attack helped reshape global maritime security. It is remarkable how often history changes through unintended consequences. Henry never intended to reform international trade. He never planned to influence diplomacy. He never imagined his name would appear inside history books more than 3 centuries later. He simply wanted freedom and wealth. History had different plans. As historians searched through old records, letters, court documents, shipping manifests, government correspondence, portraits slowly emerged, not of a monster, nor of a romantic hero, but of a remarkably intelligent sailor. Henry ever understood ships. He understood men. Perhaps most importantly, he understood patience. Patience rarely appears exciting. Movies prefer battles. Books celebrate dramatic moments. Reality often rewards quiet preparation. Henry ever spent months waiting, observing, planning, studying trade routes. When opportunity finally arrived, he was ready. History repeatedly teaches the same lesson. Fortune often favors preparation, more than courage alone. Imagine for a moment standing aboard the Fancy after the battle had ended. The sea calm once more, the stars returning overhead, wood creaking softly beneath your feet. Somewhere nearby, heavy chests filled with unimaginable treasure. Would you feel victorious? Relieved? Afraid? Perhaps all three. Because extraordinary success carries extraordinary responsibility. From that evening onward, Henry could never again become anonymous. Every stranger represented uncertainty. Every harbor carried risk. Every merchant might recognize stolen jewels. Every sailor might recognize his face. Freedom purchased through piracy always remained fragile. Perhaps that explains his disappearance. He did not seek another great adventure. He sought silence. There is something deeply human about that desire. Throughout history, many individuals have chased greatness. Far fewer have tried escaping it. Henry Every belongs to that smaller group. Once he possessed enough wealth, he vanished. At least, as completely as any famous man ever has. Some historians believe that alone reveals much about his character. Many pirates continued raiding until death finally found them. Every stopped. Whether because of wisdom, fear, or satisfaction, only he ever knew. The sea kept his confidence. The centuries kept his secret. Even now, archaeologists continue searching for forgotten records. Historians examine newly discovered documents. Researchers compare old letters written in fading ink. Occasionally, someone believes they have solved the mystery. A village record, a merchant account, a forgotten diary. Yet each promising discovery eventually raises new questions. The mystery remains. Perhaps it always will. And maybe that is exactly how this story should end. Not with certainty, but with quiet reflection. Imagine the final evening. Somewhere, far from crowded ports, far from royal courts, far from treasure ships, an elderly man watches the sun slowly disappear beneath the horizon. His hands bear old scars left by rope, salt, hard work, and war. The sea breeze feels familiar. The sound of distant waves reminds him of another life. A life almost no one around him could imagine. Did he think about the fancy? About the mutiny? About the battle in the Indian Ocean? Did he remember the faces of those who sailed beside him? Or had time softened those memories, as it eventually softens nearly all things? We cannot know. History rarely preserves private thoughts, preserves actions, and Henry Every's actions became unforgettable. His greatest treasure may never have been the gold, or the silver, or the jewels. Perhaps his greatest treasure was the mystery itself, because while fortunes disappear, ships decay, empires fall, and names are forgotten, a good mystery can outlive them all. Tonight, more than 300 years later, the oceans continue whispering their old stories. Some speak of explorers, some of merchants, some of great naval battles. And somewhere among those endless whispers, one quiet tale still drifts across the waves. The story of an ordinary sailor who challenged one of the richest empires on earth, captured history's greatest pirate prize, outwitted kings, governments, and navies, then stepped into the shadows, never to be seen again. As the wind carries across the open sea, and the stars shine quietly above the dark water, the world grows still once more. The waves continue their endless journey toward distant shores, just as they did long before Henry Every was born, and just as they will long after every story has faded into history. Good night. And may your dreams carry you gently across calm seas, where the only sound is the soft rhythm of the waves, and the quiet echoes of history